Back in 2007, Volkswagen did something completely nuts, totally unthinkable by today's standards. So what they did is they took the W12 engine from a Bentley Continental GT, planted it into a Volkswagen Golf GTi mid-engine. So they planted this V12 behind the front seats, and it was completely undrivable, but it was such a cool concept that it got me thinking, what if we took the Volkswagen Golf GTi of today and looked around in the VAG group's parts bin and see what we can find and apply it onto the design of the 2025 Volkswagen Golf GTi. I think it's going to be a very, very good looking GTi. So I'm going to redesign the 2025 Golf GTi later in this video. But first of all, I think this car just deserves some more attention, even if it's been over, a decade since this was introduced. So here we have the Volkswagen Golf GTi W12 650. Was an utterly insane concept that still mesmerizes us 14 years later. And this article is from 2021 from Car Scoops. I'm going to link this down in the description if you want to go and check it out. The Volkswagen Golf GTi W12 650 had the massive twin-turbo V12 from a Bentley Continental GT. And to create this concept, Volkswagen engineers started off with a standard Mark V Golf GTi, but then slotted in the twin-turbo W12 from the Continental GT behind the front seats, making it the legendary one-off GTi W12 650. And here you can see, just look at how planted this is. And this was a lot wider than a standard Volkswagen Golf GTi, obviously. So it was widened by 6.3 inches. It's also lowered the car by 3 inches over the standard Mark V Golf GTi and fitted wheels measuring 9 inches in the front and 12 inches wide in the rear. It just looks so cool. And you can hit 0 to 60 in about 3.5 seconds and continue to a top speed of 201 miles per hour. It's just a beast of a machine. And I do think Volkswagen designers did a great job with the additional 6.5 inches of width to make it still look clean. It doesn't look like an afterthought, this body kit that they added onto this car. So jumping into Photoshop here, just want to quickly go over this design before we jump in to the redesign, because as I said, I do think this deserves a lot more attention, because this is something that, can you imagine Volkswagen taking the 2025 Volkswagen Golf GTi and putting a V12 in it today when they're focusing 100% on electrifying the entire brand? This is a piece of automotive history that I don't think is ever going to come back. And have a look at this. We have this slot in the C-pillar, so you have air actually flowing through here, and this is also wider than the normal Golf GTi, and you can see just how much wider it is here with these beefy fenders that we have. I also love this new interpretation of the standard Golf GTi wheels with the holes in it. If you remember, the Golf Mark V had these hole design, and this is a new design specifically for this car. And just look at how clean this design was with these beautiful chamfers here, for example, in the front end, and this nice, soft, rounded, very Volkswagen designish for this type of era, these soft curvatures and radiuses that we have going all around the car. Looking at the side view, super planted, lowered by 3 inches, and that is not a small drop when it comes to a hatchback. And here you can kind of see how the glass is curved and then goes into this big typical design DNA for the Golf, this C-pillar right here with this big thickness to it. And we also have this huge side intake. Since this is in fact a mid-engine car, we can actually have a side blade on the car that will be functional for cooling the air. Now looking at the rear end here, and just look at these bazooka tailpipes in the lower section and how deep this chamfer is going in. It was probably a little bit longer as well than a typical Mark V Golf GTi, because these bumpers in the front and the rear just stick out so far and has this thickness to it, as you can see right here. But it looks super planted, and I do wish, even though it's just a crazy dream, and as I said, this was basically just for looks and for, experimenting. The driving experience of this was horrible. It did not handle well at all. If you've seen the Top Gear episode on this, that's exactly what Jeremy Clarkson says as well when he's driving this.
This car will not go round corners.
And here you can see just the mounting or the positioning of the W12 engine behind, I do believe that these are the front seats here, and here you have the C-pillar. So, looking at the new Golf here and comparing it to the previous, or this is a small facelift, but I do think the changes that they made here in the 2025 Golf GTi actually has a great impact on the design, specifically this lower section. So this is the 2021 and this is the 2020, actually I do believe it's a 2024 model. So we have a new section down here. In the previous generation we had this single slot, but now we have more of a Lamborghini-like wings sticking up in the design. I do wish maybe they had a connection here as well with the body color piece. I'm not entirely sure, but you can see that we do have new, even slimmer headlights than what we have in the 2021 model year. These looked pretty good. I do think they have more of a slanted design. I want to have them be more upright in this front end. But I do think the new ones look very chiseled. We still have the light bar in the front end of the 2024 model year, and it has a simpler outline for it. So just a single dip right here. If you compare that to the previous one, where you have double dips, so one dip here and then almost like a staircase design for the headlight outline. Looking at the rear end, not a lot of changes in the rear. As you can see, we do have new internal pieces for the taillight design itself. I do think the LEDs look fantastic on both of these because we have a different thickness here to what we have here, creating some more dynamic feeling to it. The outlines still look to be exactly the same as it was in the 2021 model year, which is not a bad thing at all. Thankfully, we still have the dual exhaust visible in the lower section. I love these new wheels. These look fantastic, and actually, if you look at these wheels and compare them to these from the W12 concept, they have sort of a connection to what was going on there. Much better looking than these in the pre-facelift. Now, the biggest letdown or disappointment with the new Golf GTi interior is just, I don't, as I said in my second channel when this first came out, is I don't understand why they made this screen so massive. It takes up space. Even if you look at it from a driver perspective here, it comes in and cuts off even the steering wheel. That's how far they needed to stretch this screen, and I don't think this is necessary to have this big screen like this, because look at the previous facelift and it looks so much better and such better integration, even though yes, it does cut off a little bit of the steering wheel here as well, but you can see that it doesn't stick up above the dash like it does on the new one. However, the good news here is that they are reintroducing physical buttons, and I do think this is going to be a trend across the entire automotive field to not have so many touch buttons that we had in the previous GTi, and specifically down here as well. Now we have actual physical buttons in the steering wheel. So if I could mix these new buttons with the old infotainment screen integration like we have here, which looks 100 times better than this new one, that would be my perfect interior for the new Golf GTi. Thankfully, we still have a housing for the gauge cluster. So with that said, let's jump into the redesign here and let's talk about what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, as I said, look at the VAG group parts bin and dig around there, and I find myself a front bumper from a Huracan STO, which I'm going to apply to this. I'm also going to take the RS5 headlights and the lower side skirt and apply it onto this. And then we need to think about the wheels. Wheels are 50% of the vibe that I get from a car. And to me, right now, there is not a single wheel that is better than what was just unveiled on the RS6 Avant GT. And I do think you could probably have guessed that those are the wheels I'm going to put onto this car, because I think they're such good looking, probably the best looking wheels I've seen in the last decade. So let's have a look at what's actually new here with this new 2025. It's actually a 2025 model year Volkswagen Golf GTi. Revealed with more power, improved tech. So it now has 262 horsepower. It's still front-wheel drive though, and I think that is the main reason why I personally would go for the Golf R, because I would like to have all-wheel drive on this car, specifically with this much power. You have new colors and numerous improvements to the interior interface. Sadly, the manual is no more, so you can only have the 2025 GTi with an automatic transmission. And I don't really understand the thought process behind that, because I can sort of understand if you're getting a Golf R, yes, I would still want to have that in manual as well, but that, yes, you can have that all automatic for 2025, but the GTi is the lower powered trim level or version of the Golf, and it's supposed to have a manual. It just feels right to have a GTI with a manual, but sadly you can't get the 2025 with a manual. So the interior tech upgrades meant to address the outgoing Golf's frustrating infotainment system. So the infotainment system of the previous Golf, it had all these weird sliders for everything, and it was pretty frustrating because I made a review on that on this channel. But as I said, it's not a 100% upgrade in my opinion, because we still have the huge massive TV that they just bought from Best Buy and put onto the dash, which I'm not a huge fan of. You still have a turbocharged 2-liter inline-4, and the US model outputs might be slightly different from the European one, which does have 262 horsepower. I do believe it's going to be the same here in the US. The 6-speed manual transmission, no longer part of the lineup. A 7-speed dual clutch is now the only transmission choice. And this dual clutch is not a bad one. It's a fantastic transmission, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to have the option to have this as a manual. Now, we talked about the design changes in the front. The headlights slimmer, the taillights new internal pieces, even though the outline is still the same. You have new wheel designs and a newly available black painted roof as well. And you can have the front badge of the Volkswagen logo, so you can have that be lit up now as an option, which I think is pretty cool. And it's also a trend that Mercedes started by lighting up their big star in the front end. The steering wheel, as I said, now has real buttons. And you have a 12.9-inch infotainment screen in a small hatchback, which, as I said, I think is way too big. And Volkswagen has confirmed that there will be an all-wheel drive Golf R for this facelift, and that will also come to the United States. So that is fantastic news. Now, looking at this wheel design, the Golf, I think the Golf has always been, the quintessential hatchback proportions. So you have a 2-box design with the hood being the one box, and then you have the second box being the rest of the body. Looking at it from a side view, it's a super clean design, and I do like this upgrade that Volkswagen did on the exterior design. And I think just adding some of these Lamborghini and Audi parts onto this car just makes it look so cool. It's not as aggressive as the W12 concept from 2007, obviously, because that would be a little bit too much for my taste to have as a production car. But I wanted to create something that could potentially go into production with just some minor tweaks to the graphics. And I actually think that the STO bumper on this actually suits this front end very well. And also the RS5 headlights, which I had to tweak a little bit to make it flow nicely into the front LED light bar that we have in the front. And then, of course, last but not least, we do have the wheels, which it doesn't matter what type of car you put these wheels on, it's always going to look great. I wouldn't put them on an S-Class, for example, but pretty much every Audi and every Volkswagen that I can think of would look fantastic with these wheels. And here you can see the before and after. Fun little experiment that I just had to do, because I do think if Volkswagen, the entire group, are doing some crazy cool designs right now. So just combining everything onto a Volkswagen Golf, I just couldn't see how that could go wrong.